Recognition, power, and influence is your birthright, and this podcast shows you how to get there. Welcome to episode number 261. I cannot think of a better way to close out 2024 than with one of my proudest moments as a coach, as a teacher, as a friend, as a mentor, as a guide, when I was able to help support Kristi to her promotion as Senior Vice President of Business Development. I love and think so deeply and care so much about each and every one of my clients. But sometimes I have clients that make the choice to work with me, to grow with me over multiple years. And Kristi is such a beautiful example of a client who has stuck with her growth. She came to me several years ago, basically looking to go from good to great. You know, my clients typically come to me as a corporate badass. They have a lot of things that are working really well, but they're just trying to get that seat at the table. They're trying to get the recognition that they already deserve. And they really desire to have a bigger voice and a bigger impact on their organizations and on the world. Kristi is absolutely one of those women. And over the years, I have been able to help her through several promotions. And then in 2024, we were able to celebrate her new role as Senior Vice President. I am so proud of her, and I love this conversation that we were able to have towards the end of the year. And I can't wait for you to listen to it. As you're listening, I hope it inspires you to what is possible for you, even in the first quarter, the first half of 2025. Let's get started. Welcome to Women Changing Leadership. I am your host, Stacy Mayer, and I teach you how to get promoted, get paid, and bring your whole self to the leadership table. I am on a mission to change organizations from the C-suite out, because women are the new face of leadership, and we are doing it on our terms. Hello, corporate badasses. Welcome to another episode of Women Changing Leadership. I am your host, Stacy Mayer, and super excited, as always, to be here with you again this week. As you know, when I bring guests on my podcast, sometimes it's because I just want to hang out with that person or I would like to meet that person. My guest today is one of those people that I get to hang out with outside of my podcast, as in she is a client of mine. I consider her to be a friend of mine, a colleague of mine, and she is just all around one of those people that I like to be around. And she's probably blushing right now. But I say this because she is one of those women that you meet and you can really talk to her about anything. You can talk to her about work. You can talk to her about kids. You can talk to her about life. And she's well networked. She knows a lot of people, and she's had a very prolific career. I am so excited. Thank you so much for being here, Kristi, and sharing your wisdom with my audience today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stacy. I feel the same way, and I'm excited to see what topics we're going to delve into today.
All right, so let me give a formal introduction of Kristi. Kristi Sarno is a seasoned biotech industry professional with close to 20 years in various business development roles. Other than helping to build and grow companies by establishing strategic relationships, Kristi has always had a passion for helping others find the resources they need to navigate their own careers. Hello, now you can see the connections. Kristi, to start out, why don't we talk about your own personal secrets to success?
Oh boy, I think some of them are the ones that you just mentioned. Honestly, throughout my career, if I hadn't listened to advice from my peers, people I consider mentors, whether they were formal mentors or not, colleagues, just listening to the advice that I was given, solicited or otherwise, actually helped me go down a path that I would not have been able to do otherwise. So, for example, I think that this may happen with our company, so you may want to consider these options. If I hadn't considered those options, I may have ended up in a very different place. So advice like that along the years that I've been given have really helped me to understand what's going on around me better than I could just with my own, view of the world. I really think that that's one of the biggest things that I've done well is listen to the advice that I'm given.
Yeah. So I actually like that point, and that could kick us off in a certain direction, which is how do you filter through the advice that you're given to know which advice is good advice and which advice is maybe not as helpful as other advice? Because not all advice is created equal.
That's a good point. I mean, I have gotten better over the years at filtering that advice because honestly, earlier in my career, I would take a lot of advice I was given as golden, as like that must be it. That's the answer. Whereas more recently, some of the advice comes from a different place and I have to think about, does that really apply to me? What does it
Mhm.
mean to me? It's been a journey trying to figure that out because I don't think people give you advice in a mean way ever.
Right, right.
It's just coming from their perspective, which along the years I've learned can be very, very different, especially as you get older and more experienced. The people around you are older and more experienced, and they have gone through a completely different experience than you have. It's just natural that they're going to have a different perspective. And most of the time, that's advantageous. But there are a few here and there that you just have to say, okay, thank you. I'm going to put that in my pocket, and I may or may not use it.
Right. One of the things that also with my clients and people that I've been working with for a couple of years, I can look back and look at originally when we first met and sort of what was happening for you. And I feel like you might have been at this crossroads with trying to understand and filter the advice that you've been given. Because there was something I remember, and I haven't even looked at this in a while, but I remember it. It was something about, I must be doing something wrong. Like it was like, because you have had at that point and still now a lot of traditional success, right? Like you would be able to close deals or you would be able to get recognition or you had a voice at various different times in your career. But there was still something more that you wanted that you weren't able to obtain, like whether it was that title at the time or to actually have a seat at the leadership table or, whatever those various different goals are at the time. And I kind of feel like, is that true, like in your memory as well, where it was sort of like, okay, I've been given all this advice. I've implemented a lot of this advice. I still am not exactly getting what I want. So let's like look at it differently, look at things differently.
Yeah. And I think I noticed that too. And that's actually why I came to you in the first place, like why I went and sought out a coach, because I just had this feeling that there were things happening that no one was going to tell me outright.
Right, exactly.
And there was some kind of subtle hints or things that maybe intangible things that I thought I was missing, either about how I was speaking or how I was showing up or subtle things that I was doing or interacting with people. And I just thought that anybody that I was actually working with who was in a position to observe those things wouldn't tell me those things because they don't want to
Mhm.
hurt my feelings or, I think it was getting to the point where it wasn't like, here's what you should do for your job.
Yeah,
It's the
exactly.
advice I needed for my career.
Right, right. So people have given you advice on your job, like you said. There's like, oh, you should think about this deal that way, or you should think about what you're working on this way. And then it becomes you need this outside lens. And I do agree with that because having that bigger perspective, like sometimes I'll say, oh, I'll just interpret or guess, like, oh, I think maybe the intention wasn't what you think the intention was, or whatever. And of course, we're just guessing. We don't know what that person was thinking when they told you that thing, but it at least allows perspective for like how you started this podcast episode between making your own decisions, like really so that okay, whether they meant this or this, here's what I think and how I want to move forward.
Yeah. But I think sometimes you need someone else, whether that is a formal coach or a friend or a mentor, to point out to you, it could be this. The
Hmm.
perspective that we were talking about,
Right.
it could be this. They might be coming from this perspective. And then you go, oh, yeah, I hadn't thought of that. Right.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
So you need that outside voice to just point out to you what the possibilities are. And then you can decide for yourself what you think is happening. But
Yeah. So, have there been any surprises? Like, have you surprised yourself throughout your career? Something that you did that you didn't maybe expect that you could do, or something that you overcame?
I do like to tell my Women in Bio story of,
Oh, great.
yes, when I was president of Women in Bio, which is a little bit ago now. It was 2016, so pre-COVID. We were working on a program called Boardroom Ready. The concept of it wasn't my idea, but and I wasn't the one running the program, but I was in charge of managing the relationships needed to get this program off the ground and also answering a lot of criticism about it. So the program is meant to help more women get board seats. And part of the main thrust of the program is a 4-day, we'll call it a training session. And it's really just about educating someone who's thinking about going on a board of what's entailed, what they might want to do to prepare, things like that. It's not really a training program, but I got a lot of criticism from the others in the industry of, if they're so prepared to be on a board, why do they need training? How come you're not training men? All the things. And so I had to get really good at A, answering questions on the fly about things like that, and B, not taking those criticisms personally, and C, feeding those thoughts and feedback back into the organization so that we could adjust and or be prepared for the consequences of some of that criticism. And I really feel like, although I hadn't done a lot of the work that we've done together in my coaching at that time, I feel like I stepped up, I managed it, I managed the relationships, we got that program launched, and I was so proud of myself, even though it wasn't even my real job.
It's still running, right?
It's still running. Since then, there's well over 100 women placed on board seats.
Wow.
It's been a fantastic success.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah.
That is absolutely huge. So actually going back to that moment, 2016, you're at a different place in your career. What made you think to raise your hand and sign up to be president of Women in Bio?
That's a funny story because I did not raise my hand.
Okay.
Someone else raised my hand for me, and those people are forever in my, network of favorite people, so to speak. So the current president at the time and the incoming president at the time just sort of decided that I needed to be considering this. And really, they had to do some convincing. I wasn't convinced that this was the right move for me. But again, at that time, I reached out to others in my network and said, what do you think about this? And all of them said, absolutely do it.
Wow.
So not a single person that I spoke to about it said, I don't know. So I went.
That's an example of taking feedback and actually saying, okay, I guess I will. Just say yes, Kristi. Everything is pointing you in this direction.
And I think about what would have happened if I hadn't done that, how different my life would be, even just thinking of those personal relationships. And it's amazing to think, like, it would have been fine, but it's one of those choices that I've made where I look back and I'm like, oh, yeah.
Yep, that was a good
right choice.
Yeah.
And I'm so grateful to those people who noticed me and approached me and talked to me about it and brought me in. It's just fantastic.
Yeah. So I know that networking is part of your job description in business development. And is this something that you always were good at? Is this like something you were naturally drawn to? Maybe high school, college, like something you were like, oh, I build relationships well. I know how to network. I know how to, bring and organize and galvanize people. Is that something that you grew into over time, or?
I think in a couple different ways. I mean, looking back when I was a kid in my neighborhood, me and my next door neighbor, best friend, we used to organize these like fairs in our backyard and like all this stuff. We were always organizing something. So I think from a very young age, my thing was always getting a bunch of people to do stuff with me. And that continues. I just came back from a trip with 10 other women. So I convinced 9 people to go on a hiking trip with no cell service for 4 days in Oregon. So I'm still doing it.
Yeah.
But I would also say that in college, I joined a sorority, and part of the process for joining the rush process that gets so much bad press was that we had to interview every sister in the organization.
Uh-huh.
And so we had to schedule those interviews and learn how to talk to all types of people. So there were 2 or 3 questions we had to get the answers to. And then from there on, you had to write up a description of what you learned from that person. So some of those interviews were 20 minutes long and very tough to get through. And some went on for hours when you clicked with someone. And it really was almost a training ground for talking to people
Yeah.
that you have never met before. And
Mhm.
I always mention that, especially with the job that I ended up in, that was a perfect exercise for me. And I wish that more people were exposed to something like that, especially when I think about kids these days and the digital technologies that they use. You know, I do things like that with my kids now. Like, here's how you talk to someone that you've never met.
Right.
Such a skill that is just going away. I think
Do
I
you
was trained in a way.
do you have any advice, like anything that let me see if we can put it in context here a little bit. I think when because the women listening to it hopefully want to advance their career and think about the next levels of leadership they can grow into. In terms of networking up, maybe managing up, building relationships outside of your organization, any words of advice?
Maybe a couple of things. One piece of advice I was given early on that has panned out throughout my career is to just ask. And I know this is talked about at a lot of networking events, but it is really true that if you send someone a brief email that says, here's what I would like to meet and talk with you about, people will give you the time more often.
I know.
They will give you the time. And whether it's a Zoom call or an in person, I try to do as many things in person as I can still. But either way, just saying like, hey, I want to learn this from you. I have a couple of questions to ask you. Here's what they are even. And people will give you the time. It's unbelievable. And I've reached out to people over the years, 2, 3, 4 levels above me who have
Uh-huh.
invited me to their offices to meet. So that's one thing. Another thing that's just a general, it's not necessarily work related, but I use it for work as well, is just to try to find out. You can play a little game with yourself if you're not good at doing this, but try to find out 1 or 2 things about that person that you didn't know. So don't
In the
want it to be a
conversation.
work pitch. Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Like,
Yeah.
ask them, oh, how did you end up living in Boston? Or what was your
Uh-huh.
vacation? Or how did you end up at this reception? Just
Right.
anything that's something you can learn about that person. And then the work stuff will just end up naturally coming into it. It always happens that way. But if you start off with more of I just want to get to know you, even if the work stuff doesn't happen, then maybe it will on the next time you meet them.
Mhm. Yeah. That's funny because I think I just did that in this conversation. Like, I actually didn't know how you signed up for Women in Bio and, like, what that journey was, and I just thought to ask it at the time, but I didn't know this, and actually, that's been my favorite story out of this conversation so far. I'm like, "Oh my gosh, that's a great story." I never thought to ask, and such a simple question that you can bring into going into a conversation. I like that. Think about what is something you don't know about them and then just ask it. Like, how did you get started? Or did you always want to be that? Right. It's so good.
And if they launch into their pitch first, fascinating conversations. This just happened to me at a networking reception last month where the person I was speaking to was like, oh, I just started this company. I'm the CEO. This is the company. This is what we do. And I was like, how did you end up going from where you were to being the CEO?
Hmm. Yeah.
Told me the whole story, and it was unbelievable and so interesting. And, I just felt like there was more of a connection there than even
Yeah.
from her own pitch to me.
Do you feel like these conversations, when you do that, do they turn into more than just them giving you advice? Like, because you said just ask. So clearly, when you're just asking, maybe you really do genuinely want to know something. You want their advice on something, right? But it seems like if you add in this step 2, where you genuinely get to know something about them, then now you've cultivated a real relationship that's not just based on them giving you advice once, one and done.
Yeah, I mean, the way I always look at it, and this is what I tell my kids, like, you can always learn something interesting from almost anyone. So even someone telling you what their last vacation was, if you've never been there, you're going to learn something about that place. And even just walking away with that, even if you don't click with this person and you never talk to them again, like, you still gotten something out of it. And
Right.
so have they, because they got to tell you about their vacation, and who doesn't want to talk about their last vacation, right? Or
Right.
you decide to ask, just using an
Yeah.
example. But you can always learn something, or you can learn what it's like for someone who has 4 kids if you only have 1. Or
Uh-huh.
it doesn't matter what it is, you can always learn something. So I just take it like that. Like, have I walked away from this conversation with a new business connection. Maybe, maybe not. But personally, that was interesting. I find
Yeah. You know, one of the things that I'm starting to realize too about your magical sauce is that, I said at the beginning of this episode that you're somebody that I feel like I can talk to about anything. And I was sort of taking that for granted. That's just because we're like each other, quote unquote, or something like that. But now I'm realizing this is a skill that you've cultivated and grown. I mean, it's a little bit of both. Like we can genuinely like each other and be alike, have like interests, like you said. But then also, it's something that you are really good at. Like, and now I'm like admiring this skill even more. The fact that I do often feel so connected to you in so many different ways. That reminds me of something that a lot of people talk about. They might be either good at networking or good at influencing. Influencing meaning getting your network to actually do something for you that you need, like whether it's to sponsor you for a role or it's to, connect you to somebody else. So, how do you bridge that gap between just like having a very vast network and then having a very influential network?
Yeah, I mean, I'm still working on that, and because it kind of ebbs and flows, I think goes back and forth depending on where you are in your career. I mean, I just finished a relatively lengthy job search where I did need to ask a lot of people for favors. And the favors were on a different spectrum. Sometimes the favor was advice, sometimes the favor was interview prep, sometimes the favor was connection. But there's definitely a difference when you need something. I think the thing I just rely on is that I try to do things for other people whenever I can. I love matching people up with jobs. I'm not a recruiter, but I love it when someone I know ends up working with someone else that I know, or I can help someone hire the right person. I just love that feeling. And so I think over the years, people remember that and they're willing to help you out as well. Or, I just try to, it's this very overused like karma thing. I think that's true. I think people remember that you don't always ask them for something. And so when you do, they're more willing to reach out for you or help you out.
Yeah, and you've brought a few women into our coaching circle as well, and that's been really incredible. Like they're bringing so much value to the group, and yeah, I'm very grateful for that, but I know everybody is, right? And it's like we all know, and
Everybody.
yeah, it benefits the world. It's so helpful.
Yeah.
I love it. That's really great. So I was thinking about what you said about that as your career grows, the feedback that you're given at a certain level, and it's important to distinguish, is this useful for me or not, and like kind of let it go. But I was also thinking about where you are in your career. And as you now are a part of the management team and making larger decisions at the table, so to speak, not just so to speak, actually, then what are you finding? And I know some of this comes back to the group that you organize next up, and we can talk a little bit about that. But like, what are you finding that you need to surround yourself with, or some of the skills that you need to have as you are navigating? It's almost like you're differentiating yourself from some of your friends, right? Like it's like things are different now. So I'd love to hear about how you're navigating the next level of leadership.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things that I'm talking about with my peers these days too that is tricky is confidentiality. So,
Oh,
working for a public company, there are situations that I would love advice on that I can't tell anyone this specific
right.
in order to get that advice. And so part of the next step group is a little bit of that. It's just a group of peers that I've brought together to discuss different topics. And, we talk about how do we ask for advice without giving away details of a situation. And a lot of it just has to be listening to other people all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So that when you are in that same situation, you can be like, oh, I remember so and so told me about this. It's a
Oh, yeah, because if the other person has gone through it, they can talk about it, right? It's no longer confidential, right? So,
sometimes that's something. Sometimes they're talking about something and they're keeping it confidential, but you can tell by what they're talking about that you're going
yeah,
to do the thing. And so that could be helpful. But it's a different way of speaking that you have to practice.
right.
And there's a lot of, groups out there to try to, help navigate this. Like there's CEO groups or CBO groups where they need to have a place where they can ask for advice. that's confidential.
Mm-hmm.
And so some of the, there's different rules for different groups, of course, but that's been one element that I'm finding interesting and challenging at this level. I think the other thing is how to surround yourself with the folks that are going through the same things you are without being too exclusionary, because it is hard to include everyone at this level because they're going through different things if they're not at the same level. And I've been on the other side of it where I'm like not allowed to join certain groups because I'm not at a certain level yet, and it's annoying, but I also feel like there has to be general groups and there has to also be specific ones that are by level, because you are starting to talk about different things and different challenges that are not the same as when you're coming up in your career. And I'm not saying I'm at the top of my career by any means, but I'm starting to notice that there has to be a different level of attention to certain details that, you know, wouldn't happen if you were at a lower level naturally for anyone.
Right, right. And I was also thinking about another challenge is when you were talking about like what to say and when and how to finesse it. And like you really have to look at what you're saying. And for sure, leadership down as well. Like I find so many women that have the value of transparency with their team, and it becomes oversharing, but to their detriment. Like, the board will start to look down on them or whatever. They'll be like, you can't tell people this. So there's those lines. And so they have to find that balance between how can I be transparent and, authentic. I don't want to just lie to them. Hey, everything's going great up here when it's not, but you clearly can't share everything with them. And so finding that balance is huge. And it also shows because, like you said, you're not at the top of your career. You still have many years left and much more impact that you're going to be making in your career. And so you want to show the people at the top that you're ready for that next level. And this is one of the ways that if you can be discerning about your communication, that's huge.
Yeah, and I think part of it too is remembering what it felt like when you were a couple of levels below. So, for
Yeah.
example, with that transparency, I've seen management teams in the past overshare
Yeah.
in the guise of, transparency, and it backfires because
Yeah.
it's not it's information that's either given out too early when there are still multiple outcomes, and then people start to worry and
Hmm. Yep.
panic, and everybody can have a different reaction to certain types of news. And then people focus on that instead of just continuing to do their job.
Right.
I've seen that happen, and I've seen also happen where it's done well, where there's
Mhm.
enough information given that people can prepare properly. So, for example, maybe even like an upcoming layoff. So give people enough time to process, to
Right.
goodbye, whatever the situation is, think about what their options are without doing it, 9 months in advance when you're not sure it's going to happen. So,
Right.
whatever timing is better for people to prepare. Like there's, a spectrum of different ways to do it. And that's just one example, but trying to remember what it felt like when you were the person receiving the news, when you're now on the other side and you have to think about how to give the news.
Yeah.
And try to
Yeah.
keep that in mind as well.
I just thought of something else too that kind of came to mind because you were talking about using your network to find out information, right? So, like just listening to them and how they solved problems and putting yourself in those rooms. And I think that as a leader, and this is, I can't imagine you ever doing this, but that sort of generic top down communication, which is just like, oh, I'm not sure, or I'll find out when you do, or like just something to like get the person to leave you alone. I feel like if you can't share information, right? Like you're like, I actually can't tell you, or whatever, like whatever that might be. You can also model or remind people that there are other people in their network. Like go talk to other, like you can kind of coach them to like, well, it's like it might be useful to start talking to people, like it just talk to other people like about what they would do in this situation, because I think there's a really great way as leaders that we can, model, live by example, share about our experiences, about what we have done and how we've navigated different parts of our career without literally just telling them what to do or like what's happening, because there is that fine line. And I don't know, that just occurred to me as like a useful thing and a skill that you do.
It's interesting. I mean, even just thinking about when you're giving people advice, like when I first started with you and I told people that I had an executive coach,
Yeah.
some people still had this idea in their mind that people get executive coaches when they're screwing up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Who goes out and gets one on their
On
own?
there. Exactly. This said, yes. Yes.
But now it's becoming way more accepted practice and people see the results and they're like, wow, that actually is a good thing. And so I feel when I've gone through something, I feel more qualified to say, maybe you should try this. This is how it worked for me.
Yeah.
That can apply to any piece of advice. Like I've actually been through this. I've been laid off. Like this is how I handled it. This is how I prepared for it. Like I can lead people to the right resources, hopefully.
Yes, to the right resources so that we don't have to be quite so passive, like leave us alone. But we also know we can't answer all their questions or spoon feed everything to them. But yeah, like I think you should go out, spread your wings, like get advice, like that kind of thing. Like get a coach, like surround yourself with these circles. I think that's so important.
I think that's good for everyone. And especially in my industry, because, I work with a lot of scientists that, just have labeled themselves as introverts and may or may not be true. In some cases, it's not true, but they, consider themselves introverts. So they're like, oh, I'm not good at that. And and I have seen people who are very uncomfortable in the kind of situations that I'm very comfortable in. And that is also true. But little bites of networking, how to do that. Like, especially if you're like a scientist type who just doesn't really like to hang out with people in general, like random people.
Yeah.
How do you still organize your network, grow your network? Because you still need a network, whether you're a scientist or not. So, little bites like that. The advice that I would give today is way different than the advice I would give 10 years ago because I had a lot to learn about other personality types and how other people approach different situations and problems. And that was something I wasn't good at that I think I'm better at now. So I would give advice differently because before I would just tell people this is how I would do it. And now I try to think about what type of personality are they? What's actually
Right.
because you
I
can't
love that.
someone who is truly introverted, you can't be like, just go to this 200% networking ed.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that's just not their thing. It's not gonna work.
Yeah, I think about that all the time with like speak up more or whatever, that kind of advice. It's like, no, like, like there are different that could be very detrimental for them. They also may never be good at that. And it's not because they have imposter syndrome, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, I love that.
Maybe for those people, it's the advice is more like, hey, I know this person.
Hmm.
Maybe you guys should talk.
Yes.
Something different, that also helps them grow a network is
Yeah.
lots of ways to do it. There's so many ways to do it.
Yeah. So I love having conversations with you. I've had a few different conversations with you on LinkedIn. We'll link to some of those interviews on the show notes if anybody wants to hear more from Kristi. But I also want to ask you the $1,000,000 question, which is why you personally feel motivated to have a seat at the table.
Well, I know you've asked me this before, and I feel like I have a slightly different answer every time.
Good.
But I just feel like I have seen a lot of different things at this point. My career has been nonlinear, non-traditional in a lot of ways, and been at a lot of different biotechs and some consulting, some different business models. And I feel like that gives me a lot of different viewpoints to choose from when I'm in a situation. And that's really helpful for small companies, which is the space I like to play in. So, even just in recent years, I feel like I've been able to contribute to the conversation in a way that changes the narrative, gets people to think about other options that they may not have thought about before and actually explore what those outcomes could be. I love that feeling. It's kind of like what I described with connecting people with a job. When I put forth an idea and it actually happens or even just gets discussed, I feel so good about it.
Right. Yeah. It's like you're really making that impact and actually seeing it come to fruition. That's huge. So then you're like, well, maybe I could do more of that and like more of that, like where else can I impact? And it just like grows.
That actually keeps me motivated. When I see that I'm having an impact, it keeps me motivated to keep doing.
Yeah. So good. Any other advice for a woman trying to advance her career, feeling a little bit stuck, can't figure out what to do next?
Yeah, it's just, I would say, introvert or not, reach out to either someone you know, and if it's like a friend, have a conversation where you're like, I want to talk about work today. Like pick someone and just, if it's just a friend, if that makes you comfortable. Obviously, I advocate getting a coach if you have the resources and you click with someone, you can find someone like Stacy who's awesome, or try to have those more formal conversations. If you're going through a place in your career where you're thinking, I want to switch from, say, being a scientist to an IP lawyer, who has done that? See if you can find them on LinkedIn and just see if you can talk to them for 20 minutes about what happened there. What happened there? How did you do that? And see if you think that's for you, because it may not be. You may not, there may be aspects of a job that you think looks awesome that isn't something you think you're going to like in the end. And you want to do those informational interviews, I call them.
Yeah.
So just think about different ways that would work for you, but don't do it in your head.
Yeah.
That's the biggest piece of advice. Don't do it just in your head. So that's not going to be the best way for almost anyone.
Totally. That is so true. I have to remind myself of that as well.
We all fall into that trap.
Yeah.
You need to get different perspectives in the mix.
Yeah. Well, I definitely recommend connecting or following Kristi on LinkedIn. Any other ways that you want to connect with folks?
LinkedIn is probably the best way. That's the one I use the most. It's my Rolodex, to use an outdated term, and, love hearing people's opinions. And I try to put stuff on there that makes sense. So yeah, great. That's definitely awesome.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for being here today. I'm so excited to share your thoughts and ideas with my audience.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure.
Before you go, I have a question for you. Do you know how close you are to your next promotion? Really? Not what your boss has told you, not what you even believe to be true, but have you actually taken the time to sit down, take an assessment, review the 5 categories that it takes to get promoted into senior executive leadership positions, and decided where you fall in each category, and given yourself a ranking on a scale of 1 to 10 of how close you are to getting your next promotion? Have you done this? Well, now's your chance. If that feels interesting to you and you're like, hey, I want to know exactly how close I might actually be, or how far away you might be, and what it's going to take to get you even closer, then I invite you to take my promotability quiz. This is a quiz that I put together with practical tips that actually tell you where you're lacking and where you're winning. What are the areas that you actually need to improve, and not necessarily what your boss is telling you all the time, so that you can take concrete steps towards landing that next promotion and changing the face of the leadership table. Go to yourpromotabilityscore.com to take your free assessment today.